Hi, welcome back to another episode of From Dropout to JD. I'm your host, Adesua, and this week's guest is Jacob.
Hey Adesua, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Excited to be on this podcast.
That's awesome. I'm excited to have you. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your journey like, education-wise?
Awesome. Well, I'm a little bit older than the traditional student. Um, 25, going to be 26 in a couple months here. And it's definitely been kind of an up and down journey to get to applying to law school, hopefully in the September. Um, so I'd say the journey started around 10 years ago. I grew up homeschooled, and my family, I knew early on was not going to be able to pay for my education. So I knew that was something I would have to take care of on my own.
Mm,
Growing up with a lot of anxiety and frankly, kind of a lot of self-doubt due to being first generation student, having just kind of some general anxiety on my own in the first place. I knew I wanted to pursue law, but it seemed like an almost impossible journey. The more I read about it, all these articles that say, oh, here's why you should not do law school. Here's why law school is a terrible idea. Here's how 1L year is the worst time of most lawyers' lives. I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to afford it in the first place. So these are the things kind of weighing on my mind as a teenager around 10 years ago. So as I worked through my high school education and homeschool, I worked ever since I was about 14 or 15 years old,
wow.
and I've probably worked. I think it's either 7 or 8 different jobs. I worked as a golf cart washer and detailer.
Mm,
I played professional disc golf to earn money on the side. I did. I was a dairy clerk. I was an overnight grocery stalker. I was a lube technician for oil changes.
mm.
I did, I was a project manager for an IT company based in Dallas. We commute back and forth multiple times a week. I was an electricity plan salesman, and those are just a few of them. All those things just to kind of pay my way through my community college education, which I
Okay.
started in 2015. So I started my college education, I guess, about 7 or 8 years ago, just about. And I worked through my community college degree and I got married in
Wow.
2018, right as I graduated with my associates. Wasn't planning on getting married at 22 years old, but stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so after getting into University of Texas in Austin, in 2019, I did one semester there trying to work full time as a financial sales consultant for a bank
Okay.
and then do college part time. Back then, there wasn't any of the remote stuff that COVID has brought about. So I was having to basically go between work and school, and classes at UT at the time were basically 9 to 5. Guess what? My shift was 8:30 to 5:15, basically. So I was not getting any breaks during the week. I was working every Saturday of the month. I was still missing most of the classes because I just couldn't make it on time. And I was paying for parking in downtown Austin, which, if anyone lives in Austin and parks downtown, you know that that's probably going to run you about $10 to $20 a day.
Oh.
Um, After calculating all the costs out, seeing how it affected my grades and my performance at work and this new job, I was just thinking like something's got to give. I know that if I want to go to a top 20 law school, which is my goal, I need to try to have a GPA as close to 3.9 as possible, which is just what I was maintaining. I felt confident I could get B pluses and A minuses doing work full time in college part time, but it wasn't going to be in the 3.9 range.
Mm,
So I decided that I thought it would be smart to try and get work experience that could benefit me. I could save a lot of money and just do as well as I could. So I worked for 3 years, took a break from my college education, and then basically I quit last year after my wife and I had saved enough money. and I came back to UT in the fall. And so I just finished my second semester back and should hopefully be graduating in the spring. Started practicing the Lsat as I finished my my last couple months at my job, and have been working on it while in college full time as well. So hopefully now, finally in a position after all these years saving, working, getting experience, training for the Lsat, to be applying for law schools in September.
Wow, what a story. So I know that you've been preparing for this for about 10 years, but what got the idea of becoming an attorney in your head in the first place?
So I'll say it's because of a lot of the trite reasons that a lot of people say that get them started. I was a good reader and writer, and people noted that about me. And I also had a pretty, it sounds silly saying this for someone who's younger, but I had a pretty strong sense of justice. I often, ever since I was a young age, felt disturbed by what I felt were perversions of justice.
Hmm.
And I was very involved and interested in politics. I was being homeschooled while there wasn't a lot of the same supports that one would find at a typical public school institution. I did have more time available. I did probably 2 hours a day of school, 3 hours. And then a lot of that was just my own self-education as well, past about age 14 or 15. So I had time to research my own interests. So
Hmm.
I researched law, politics. Researched international policy, how federalism worked, all these types of things, and I found quite a great attraction to it. And so it really started with thinking about, okay, I think law could be a good pursuit. It would enable me to make, good money for my family in the future that I want to have. It would enable me to pursue my sense of justice, as well as be able to help support my vision of how the legal system should run.
Okay.
And it would also enable me to potentially pursue, if I wanted to, a career in politics, either local or national. And which I think that last part is kind of not so much anymore. I've gotten a little bit disenfranchised or disillusioned to the idea of going into politics.
That's interesting because I am now interested in politics as of late. So I'm curious as to why you're now disenfranchised.
I guess disenfranchised is the wrong word because it makes me sound like I can't be involved. That's not it. It's disillusioned, I would say. And maybe more with the idea of national politics.
Okay.
It seems like our system right now is structured to where those either who are willing to bend to the will of a lobby that's willing to fund their campaign, or those who have enough money to fund their own campaign, generally are those who succeed. It was kind of like a popularity contest and a money contest to an extent. The larger the platform you're running for. And personally, I think that there's ways we could change our campaign system to be more equitable.
Right.
For example, setting a limits on campaign financing so everyone gets the same platform and people can win based on the quality of their platform rather than, I remember in 2020 working at the bank,
Mm-hmm.
and all I could hear every day was just Michael Bloomberg's ads running over and over and over again. And it's because he has billions of dollars.
Right.
Versus, like, I didn't hear anything from Buttigieg, I didn't hear anything from Warren, I didn't hear anything from like political candidates who had interesting platforms, but ultimately didn't have the same money that Bloomberg did. And that's a powerful influence on the vote. I think the other issue is that national policy, oftentimes, it's much more of a zero-sum game where there's often winners and losers because our country is so vast and national policy affects different regions so differently. I think that local politics is more what I'd be interested in, like even just a city council position or a state office of some kind, because working in a state office or local government, you can really, I think, make decisions and help influence policy that would truly benefit all, if not most, of the constituents in either your district or the state as a whole or the city. And that seems more appealing to me. And I think there's less of the barrier to entry from money or popularity than you would find in a national campaign. Bless you.
Oh man. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, that's a great answer. I like the point you made about how the more money you have, the more sway you have. I think that is one of the reasons I have, like one of the issues I have with the government also. It's one of the reasons I have with the whole like law school journey, like to be able to apply. So are you trying to apply to all 20 like top 20 schools?
Most of them, honestly,
Yeah.
and we're looking at about if I don't get fee waivers, you're looking at $1,600 or so.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then you've also, I know, taken the LSAT 3 times, which is, or going to take it a third time is what it is.
Yes,
Okay.
I think June 11th will be my next take.
Yeah, and that's pretty expensive as well.
Hmm. They now upped it to 15 more dollars too. It was 200 as of my first two takes, and it's up to 215 now.
Yeah, that's crazy. And they're also talking about getting rid of the LSAT. Do you have any opinions on that?
I do actually. um, I don't think that it would necessarily be a problem for something like a JD Advantage program that they're discussing
Okay.
if it's determined to be an effective indicator of one's performance in law school, being an alternate, or like the GRE, for example, being an alternate, if there's research to suggest there's a good tie in there. But for a long time, and with lots of data to back it up, LSAT has been besides maybe socioeconomic background, I would say, LSAT has been the greatest indicator of how one's going to perform in law school. It's not obviously perfect because there are plenty of people that went to lower ranked law schools and didn't get a great LSAT and are amazing attorneys. Camille Vasquez, Johnny Depp's attorney,
Right.
I think
Right.
went to a law school ranked under 100. And she's obviously an incredible attorney. She's probably going to be billing for somewhere in the 1,000 an hour range.
Yeah.
And so, but in training for the LSAT, although it's frightening and frustrating sometimes, I have seen how it's affected how I read and understand material. Even I've taken finance coursework. I research finance in my spare time because finance is a professional interest of mine. Markets are professional interest, equities, commodities, all that. And when I used to realize is that I would read articles and I would accept what was being said oftentimes at face value, not recognizing argumentative slants or assumptions that were being made. Now I can read these lengthy 10-page articles filled with dense material, and I can see while there is a lot of information in there, they're extrapolating from that information based off of assumptions. And I can say, that's kind of a big leap that you're making. I don't
Mm,
know if I would come to the same conclusion based off of this evidence or this going on in the market. And I wasn't reading that way before. I wasn't thinking that way before. Logic games enable you enable you to think syllogistically. A plus B equals C. A lot of
mhm.
people never get that sort of formal logic training. And so I think if you just accept that the process is going to suck and you just like commit yourself to it, the LSAT can be a really kind of enriching experience that does prepare you to actually think like a lawyer. And I actually took a course taught by Professor Perry, Dr. Perry, who was a professor at Harvard. He actually wrote the book Deciding to Decide, which
Oh,
is on Supreme Court procedure, I believe, and accepting cases. And he teaches cases on constitutional law and civil procedure in the undergraduate portion of UT, as well as being a law professor.
oh wow.
And so I took a course on constitutional law structured exactly like a law class. And the skills I learned on the LSAT absolutely transferred to my interpretation of cases and how they reasoned through and justified the holdings and the majority opinions, or you know, contradicted the holdings and the dissents on the opinions. And so overall, I guess my opinion would be that the LSAT, as of right now, is the best indicator we have for how you're going to do in law school. And until we find a better alternative, probably the top institutions would be justified in continuing to maintain it as essentially not necessarily a requirement, but a competitive advantage and a soft requirement. And one of the other things that I think is the most important is I think the LSAT is probably actually the tool that best creates equity
Okay.
in the law school application environment, because GPA, ideally, if you have a really perfect, calm, happy life, you don't get subject to massive anxiety or depression or lose a family member or have your car break down, like all these types of things going on during your college education process, all things I've had happen. You will be able to maintain a really great GPA. All that goes super well for you. And you don't have to work full time in the midst of it. So getting a GPA that's really high, I think, is more representative of oftentimes socioeconomic background than the LSAT is. The LSAT, if you can put in like a year solid study, and even if you just use free materials or bum materials off a buddy or have someone from Reddit send you their power score books,
Right.
you can get a top level score and have access to the best schools in the country. Whereas GPA, there's no redeeming it. Like, it is what it is. And even if it's a result of something terrible happening to you
Right.
or a result of having to pay your way through or whatever, your GPA is set in stone pretty
Yeah.
much.
Right.
And it's much more expensive. So if you try to like artificially beef up your GPA by extending your college education, that is an expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the LSAT isn't expensive, but I've seen people that have come from basically nothing. So many stories of how people who didn't have the GPA story they'd want got into their dream school because the LSAT enabled them to just study for this one test, kill it, and then move up.
Wow. That's awesome. And I never thought of the GPA perspective. That is so true. Like, I had mental health situations that had given me poor grades at like in periods of times, and I can't. And honestly, do you think an addendum would work? Like, are you gonna write an addendum for like the loss of a family member or your car breaking down? Like, do you think those are valid like excuses for your GPA?
So for me, it's a little bit different. I have been able to maintain a GPA above 3.9,
Oh wow.
but the issue is that I did have to delay my education by years and work
Oh,
full time and save and pay my way through. So it's like people who don't have access to money or who are subject to issues like that have to make decisions like, okay, do I potentially put myself through and hurt my grades
right.
unfairly? Or do I delay my education by years and years? The law school application process gets more and more competitive, which it has. Like, the cycles now are nothing like they were in 2015, 2016.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the decisions we're forced to make. I think an addendum is justified in certain scenarios. I have seen people say that it can be superfluous. So if I were going to include an addendum, it might be in a semester where I had a significant downturn from my average trend. I would explain what happened. And so I had my family almost break apart. I've had lost family members. I had, let's see, I was getting married in the middle of the semester. I went to a wedding of a family member, and then attendance was striked off. That hurt my grades. And so if I were going to have a semester where, let's say, I was A's, 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 C's, A's, 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 I would
Or
explain where those C's came from.
okay.
Or even if you started slow because maybe you just didn't have a vision, you were young, you're immature, and then you have this upward trend, you are, empowered, I believe, to explain why you had that upward trend. What's your journey been in explaining that upward trend? And law schools like to see that kind of explanation. I will probably have to write an addendum briefly explaining why I had a 3-year hiatus in
Oh,
between associates and bachelors. And so I'll probably just briefly explain, I worked full time to save money to pay for my education. I was debt averse, just seeing how debt affected my family growing up. And it's also part of frankly, as I am a Christian, and so it's my faith has been a really important part of my journey as well, and how I've structured my journey, how I've lived out my marriage. And so for me, debt is something that for the most part I've tried to avoid if it was unnecessary or extra or trying to get ahead by utilizing it.
Mm.
And I figured it would be wise. I don't think it's by any means like a sin to use debt or anything like that. It's not, there's no biblical basis in that. But there's plenty of evidence in the world as well as in the Bible to suggest that debt is obviously a burden. And
Yeah.
as interest weighs on you and it builds over time, and as it can create, debt just doesn't feel as real as taking actual cash out of your account and paying it. When I take thousands of dollars to pay for a couple summer courses out of my account, it's like, am I really committed to law school? Because man, I left a good job that I worked for years to come back to college and just pay money to have myself evaluated harshly by a professor. That's
Right.
a tough sell. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of how I would negotiate an addendum. So have you had kind of like an up and down journey on your GPA path?
More of like an upward slope, thankfully. I wrote down what you said about not having a vision because that's exactly what it was. I was just young and dumb and didn't have to like pay for college. My dad helped me get a loan, and then my grades got really bad and my parents found out and they stopped financially supporting me. So then I had to pay for school. And that was like 2 to 3 years off of like working or like being in school, is what I'm trying to say. And that like I mean, it changed my life. Like I'm like a different person. I mean, I grew up. So now I work full time and I'm in school and I want to go to law school and I've been getting like straight A's for the most part. So I'm
Major
hoping,
kudos. Wow.
yeah. So it's been a huge pivot, but my GPA is low because of what I did my first go around. But there's a story, and you can very obviously see that there's a story from my report card.
That's awesome. And schools do, I don't know if you've ever watched like the Dean Z
Oh yeah,
like
Michigan.
videos. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love her. She's so cool. But she'll look at stuff like that. Like they'll look that
Oh,
deeply into if there's a trend. And while even if maybe you're below the medians of some school you'd be shooting for, that can help overcome something like that to an extent. And then of course, like you said, you're shooting for a high LSAT. Getting a
yeah.
high LSAT is like the great equalizer.
That's
And
true.
yeah, and there's very few people who can't, from in my experience, even people starting out in the 120s, 130s have gotten up to 160s, 170s. So, and I doubt you were even that low. You seem like you're pretty smart. So
Thank you. My LSAT score, it's difficult because I struggle with like focus and attention, like ADHD, to put it into words. But with my anxiety, because I also suffer with anxiety, I can't take like Adderall. It doesn't work with my system. So there's not a lot of medication I can take to help with that. But I think that it's gonna be a what's it called? It's like I'm gonna keep like my goal is to do 15 minutes and then like a 5 minute break like 7 times and then increase it to 20 and then 25 and then 30 and then 35 till I like can do sections in one and then do a test or like two sections at the same time and just keep going. Um, and then after our talk yesterday, we had like a brief phone call. For those who don't know, I do that with everyone I talk to, just like get to know them before we talk. You told me how I can apply in November and that wouldn't hurt me. So that like gave me 2 extra months because I was planning on doing it in September. So
yeah,
that's my plan.
awesome. Yeah, it's in my experience, I'd say in the past, wisdom would say that, you want to apply as early as possible. You can apply September 1st, do it. And nowadays, law schools are taking their time more. And the most competitive advantage you can have is putting out your very best application for sure.
Okay.
It's not about being out day one, it's about putting out your best self. Um, and that's a tough thing to manage because I don't know if you experience this, but you just kind of want to get those applications out there.
Oh God.
we've been waiting for this, we've been working for this, and it's just like, I want to get the applications out now, and I want to have my decision by October 1st. Like, and that's like such an emotional conundrum to deal with, and it's so anxiety inducing. But I don't know, we've been patient this long, so we got to put our best selves out there. And I'll be definitely praying for your LSAT journey, because it's a tough one. But I would just say, really try to enjoy the process. And I don't know what service you're using, but 7Sage has been really great. And it's also cheaper than a majority of other programs, I would say. 7Sage, I believe for a monthly is about $69 a month, and then annual is about $600 a year, versus Princeton Review, you're going to be paying like almost $2,000 type thing.
Right.
I think Kaplan's kind of expensive too. But 7Sage, I was, creeping Reddit like all of us who are obsessed with this law school process. And every time I saw a poll, it was 7Sage or LSAT Demon pretty much. And
Right.
7Sage usually was the top one. And so I was like, I guess I'll roll with 7Sage then. It seems cheaper. And they even give you access to LSAC's Law Hub service, where you can basically take, so you have access to over 90 LSATs that have been administered. And on Law Hub, it is the exact format you have on the real LSAT.
Wow.
So before doing each of my LSATs, I took practice LSATs on the real Law Hub format just to be well versed in it. And I think it definitely makes a difference, because you don't want to be practicing on one format and then on real test day, it just feels completely different.
It's funny how this process will kind of change you as a person, because when you said it's like the exact same format, I got like tangibly excited, which is kind of sad, but also that's cool that that's out there, because that's something I'm worried about, because people say, like, I've watched YouTube videos where they're like, I would wake up in the morning, exercise, and then like eat health, like I changed my diet for the LSAT, all this different stuff, just so that for test day, I was like as healthy and as strong as I could be for the test. So like to practice like you want to perform, like that would require the format that is used on the test day. So that's cool.
Yeah, and 7Sage, again, you get full access to the Law Hub service. The other cool thing is that you get access to all the tests through the 7Sage service as well. And you actually are able to set up your own drills for sections. You can make them as large or as small as you want. You can time them however you want. And then you get analytics. So it can tell you how the difficulty level of each question. It'll tell you what your trends are, if you're going up in score or down in score, and what question types you suffer from in particular. So basically my rhythm would be taking, in the months leading up to each LSAT, it would be take 1 to 2 full-length practice tests a week, blind review it, so that way I'm sure that I'm testing my foundations. Then I would see where I was having struggles with the question types and drill those question types. So it was practice test, review test, drill problem areas, and then take another practice test. And I studied for basically it was patchy kind of over a few months. It ended up being about 4 months of about 1 hour a day for my diagnostic of 155 to become an average of 166.
Wait, how long did it take you?
About 4 months of 1 hour a day.
Okay, 4 months of 1 hour a day. Okay, that's solid. And can you explain for the audience what a blind review is?
Of course. So basically a blind review, let's say you go through a full-length practice test. You do not look at the score or your results yet.
Okay.
You go back over every question, every section, again, without looking at the answers, untimed, and you try and solve everything. And you sit there on some questions and you're going to be there for 10 minutes like, I can't figure this one out. And you're probably going to whittle it down to 2 answer choices, and then you're just going to have to pick one. And then at the end of it, you've taken your time on every question, you've given yourself the best shot that you can, and then you see what your score is at the end of it. You'll get a raw score and a blind review score, and If your blind review score is really, really high, then that's a good indicator that you have good foundational knowledge and you really need to work on your speed.
Okay.
And so for me, like the delta started as I didn't do a blind review on my very first diagnostic, but on my second test, I got a 154 and my blind review was a 172. So for me, it was pretty much just upping my speed. I only had one blind review ever out of about 20 that I did on practice tests that was under a 170. It was a 168. And my average when I stopped doing blind reviews after about 20 practice tests was my average blind review was about 174 or 175.
Wow.
And while my average practice test was about 166. So
Okay.
yeah, it's so I knew that it was really just increasing my speed, and my real problem area was logic games, which
Oh,
made
okay.
it clear that speed was the issue. Logic games is all about finding the absolute smartest way to solve the games and solving them quickly, because most people with enough time can solve any game.
Right.
But it's really just the timing that it makes it so hard, because you have to find such an efficient way of solving it. And that doesn't come naturally to everybody. Unless you're like a logic games magician or like an IQ genius, like most people are not acing games right off the bat. I think for most people, it's probably the hardest section. And then with some good practice, it becomes like a -2 to 0 range. For me, it's still not been the easiest. I'd say I probably average somewhere around -3, -4 per section.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
about 4 wrong or so.
And you still
Um,
get like a 170?
I've hit 2 scores over 170 in my practice. I had a 174, a 173, and I've had a few 169s.
Oh, okay.
And so logic games, it's definitely one that you want to get as close to mastery as possible, because for most people, doing better than 3 wrong on average on reading comprehension and logical reasoning, it's really tough to do better than that, because there's so much variation in the question types you get, and they're so hard. Like the hard questions in reading comprehension and logical reasoning are really hard. Like sometimes, like there's just some questions I never solved even doing the blind review. And after I got the answer, I was like, how the heck was I supposed to get that? So the assumption for me is walking in, like, I'm probably going to get around 2 wrong in reading comprehension, logical reasoning, maybe 3 wrong. And logic games, if I get 0, we're in the 170s. If I get 3 or 4, we're right on the barrier. And so logic games is the one where if you really get efficient with it, you can most consistently get 0. I've seen from all 170 scorers, that's like an easy first step to try to get is mastery of logic games. The cool thing is if you really master that logic language too, it does transfer over to logical reasoning and reading comprehension,
Oh,
because that kind of conditional relationship between all the elements of the game, it does transfer to how you relate elements in a passage together.
okay. That's interesting. As you were talking, I was kind of thinking about how you said earlier that you're depth averse, but then with your LSAT score, it's looking like you're going to probably get really good scholarships. Is that something that you're factoring in your law school process? Like if you got a full ride to say like a T50, would you take that over like sticker price at like a Harvard or a Yale?
So that is a really good question. And so for me, I am wanting to shoot for big to mid law in Texas.
Oh,
I want
okay.
to work in corporate securities or real estate, most likely. And so it's a little bit difficult because at a T50, so for example, for me, it'd be like University of Houston might be one that I'd look at. And my LSAT right now is pretty high, well above their median, and so is my GPA. So there's a good chance I could get close to full scholarship there versus, but I think overall, the class in the private sector has around a 30 to 40%, I think it's about 30% chance at big law for students that graduate from there, which is pretty good. But that requires that I be basically top 30% of the class.
Mm.
And versus at like, let's say Duke, it's like basically anyone who wants to get big law is going to get big law in Texas. It's like 70 to 80% of the class who does it, but a lot of that is self-selection. People want to work in public interest or want to do a clerkship, so they move on to something else. So Duke, it's pretty much, not only are you gonna get big law, but you'll be able to get your pick of summer internships all through law school. And those pay you like $40,000 a summer. So you can basically pay off 120K in debt just by getting summer internships. So that's kind of an element under consideration. And it doesn't, like I could be bottom 20% of the class and easily get into the jobs I'm wanting at Duke. And for me, I am not the type of person who assumes that I'm going to be top of my class in any law school. Not even if I went to like 100th or below ranked law school, would I assume that I'm going to be top of the class or even middle of the class? I kind of account for the worst case scenario. My wife and I have saved pretty aggressively, and we are selling our home right now, actually, that we bought in 2019. And so it would seem like so long as I kept debt under about 170,000, I would basically pay it all off in cash immediately upon graduating from law school, no matter what. And that's what I would do. But I know that's not doable for everybody. I would say if I had no cash and I was just going to be accepting debt, I'd say it would be a hard decision, but I would probably, if it were between like 150,000 at Duke versus 0 at University of Houston type situation, I might still choose Duke.
Okay.
Just because I would feel confident I can get good internships at the firms I want to work at, and I could pay off the debt that way. And the other thing is I'm planning to live off of very little of what I earn from a big law career. Because I mean, if you're getting paid $205 right now in regional firms to work there, and you just live off of as little as 75,000 a year, you're walking away with like 120K you can pay down towards debt in year one.
That's crazy. I didn't even think of it like that. And I thought it was funny that you said Duke, because my sister's going to Duke, so that's why I was smiling so hard, because it was
Really?
like, yeah, no, it's pretty insane. Yeah, she got in.
That is incredible. Oh, what a dream.
I went with her to their open house, and I wish I hadn't, because I fell in love with that law school. It's amazing. It is actually so insane that I didn't hear about it more when I was applying to like undergrad, because I would have really would have tried to gone. But it's an amazing program.
North Carolina is so beautiful too, and it's super cheap there. It's like low living expenses, and the law school is like a castle. It's like,
it is. It is. Oh man. So how were you and your wife able to actually save money so that you could go to school full time? Because that's something I'm interested in and would like some advice on, because I don't know how I'll be able to work 40 hours and study for the LSAT the way I want to.
So I will say the big thing that helps, first with your last part really quick, I was working full time when I first started studying for the LSAT, and it's really, if you can give yourself about an hour a day, that's about enough to do well. And I mean, maybe it's like, if like sometimes what I would do is I would be in between clients. So I helped people, like I was a financial sales consultant. So I'd help people with estates, mortgages, investments, checking accounts, savings accounts, debt. So consolidating debt, all that kind of stuff. And so I would sometimes just be working on like a game for 15 minutes, and like a client would walk up, I'd have to pause the game and then help the client get back to the game. And so that was just how I had to work sometimes. And then sometimes either really early in the morning or really late at night, I'd be taking a full LSAT or waiting till the weekend to take an LSAT practice test. And that's how I did my first couple months of training, and it's doable. I do not believe, not only do I not believe it's necessary to study for 4+ hours a day, but I think it's actually just counterproductive in the long run, because I don't think it helps very much to study past 2 hours for most people, maybe 3 at most. And the other issue is, if you're studying that much, you're going to be exhausted if it's effective study, and it's going to burn you out. I almost never got burned out from studying the LSAT.
Oh.
I did get burned out. Like, I never had a moment where I was like broken down crying because of the LSAT, because I just managed my time well. I was frustrated for sure, especially if I had like a dumb test where I got like 5 points below my average or something, and I put my heart and soul into every practice test. I'm like, ugh. But ultimately, I didn't overdo it. I wanted to enjoy every moment and be invested in every moment. And I think that really helped. And honestly, the actual tests I've taken have been my favorite part. Like, both of my 2 real tests have been the best part by far. I think it's just the fact that it's real and that you're really submitting a score to law schools makes it so much more fun. But going back to your original question on saving money, my wife and I learned how to handle finances pretty early on. I knew that was something I wanted to master early on in our marriage, as we moved away from our family's homes, because we didn't move in together till after we got married. Both of us being Christians, that was something we wanted to do. So we consolidated all of our finances and started planning based off of our income. We looked at what we'd be making after taxes. We decided how much we might want to donate, how much we wanted to eat off, like live off of in terms of food, what were our guaranteed expenses each month versus, like rent is guaranteed, electricity guaranteed, you're going to be paying for gas, you're going to be paying for groceries generally. What can you control then? Okay, we can control our entertainment budget, our eating out budget. And I don't know about you, but for me, like, eating out can turn out to be like $800 a month if I'm not careful. It can be like, I've really learned over time to control that. Like, at this point, we've brought down our eating out budget to about $50 a month or so.
Oh, okay.
Like, we'll go out once a week and eat $10 to $15. We'll get like a good deal somewhere and just enjoy it. Or maybe if we want to eat out somewhere fancier, we'll take a break for 2 weeks. We'll we go and get some Thai food. We'll get a big bowl of green curry, and we'll split it, because neither of us need more than that.
Right.
And it's like, ultimately we're enjoying that. And then we don't skimp on our grocery budget. We get foods that we like at home that we know are healthy and, good. And so that makes that a little easier. But the big thing is we budgeted for saving every time. And saving, I mean, that saying pay yourself first is maybe overdone, but it's true. Like, you budget for saving, just like you budget for any other bill, and you'll be able to do it. Like, if you budget to have $1,000 a month saved and put away, you're going to have 12 grand after 1 year. After 3 years, you're going to have 36 grand. And that's if your income doesn't go up. And so we averaged saving about, I'd say $2,500 a month the whole time I've been in university, and during the time I was out of university. So we averaged saving about 30 grand a year, roughly like 30% of our income or so. And I don't even think that's including retirement. We saved a lot. And so we just became selective with where we spent our money. I think the big thing is when people, and like, we didn't make crazy amounts of money. Like, my wife and I had, like, you walk into like a Bank of America and you see the guy sitting there who helps you open a checking account. That was me. I wasn't making crazy amounts of money. My wife has been a substitute teacher, a teacher, and then she's been like a teller slash banker.
Hmm.
And so that's the money we've been making. And so we just saved a lot off of that. We kept, if we wanted to save more, we didn't go out, to movies or to stuff weekly as much. And also because of that, we've been able to budget for like a little vacation. Like I was able to surprise her with a trip to Disney World in
Aw.
last year. Yeah, she'd never been in before. And so like 1 week before I'd set everything up, verified I could get flights, I was like, hey, how does going to Disney World sound? And she
Aw.
was like, wait, what? And she just lost her mind. And we spent a lot of time at Star Wars and it was amazing. I I went once when I was a kid and I was like, it'll probably be amazing for her, but it'll probably just be, okay for me. It was so much more fun as an adult.
Oh wow.
I'm
That's
not a Disney adult by any means, but it was amazing.
That's awesome. What a great surprise. And what great advice, honestly, because the way you talk about it just seems very sensible. And like, say for yourself, yes, but like, I want to have $1,000 to like rely on like later on. So doing that now when like would help future me is basically what I'm getting from your advice. It's not like I'm hurting myself by not going out to eat. It's I'm helping myself. So that's cool.
You're exactly right. And honestly, starting that habit now when we're young is so important. If you haven't been exposed to what compound interest can do for you, I would heavily encourage
Hmm.
researching that, because right now we have time on our side and you're probably going to make good money. Like you're somebody who's worked hard, is ambitious, and you're pursuing law. You're like, by virtue of our conversation, you seem to be an ambitious person. And so probably you'll have solid earnings. And you're also like talkative and collegial, which is frankly, a lot of people who pursue law are really toxic. I'm just going to be honest. I
Oh.
read these Reddit forums and I'm like, man, I don't know. So if you have like a nice person to talk to, that is so powerful in the business world. So really, when you know you're going to be earning good money, it helps to plan. I've been planning what I will do, because if you've like not earned much for so long and then all of a sudden you're making 150, 200,000 a year, it's easy to just like spend everything. And then you're the golden handcuffs. All of a sudden, all you're living for, working 60 hours a week for as an attorney, is to pay your bills. That's no way to live.
Yeah.
And so for me, like if I can live off of 200,000 a year, and at big law firms it goes up by about 20,000 every year for 8 years.
Oh wow.
So let's say year one, I'm living off of, like, we're planning to have kids around that time, so maybe it'll be 100. Like we'll just say it's super hoity-toity. It's 100, and I'm saving like 70 or 80 after taxes. Then if I get a raise to 225 after year two, I'm not gonna start spending all of that money. What I would do is I would save an additional 20 and maybe elevate our living expenses to 105. Year three, it's 250. Okay, our living expenses are now 110, and I'm saving like 120, 130,000.
Wow.
And so after 8 years, if you're doing it like that, you're somewhere in the neighborhood of one. And if you're earning interest, you'll be having 1.5 to 2 million saved. You can leave. You can do whatever you want. You can make a career transition. You can go back to school. You can, I don't know, start writing blogs while traveling in an RV if you want. Like,
That's so true.
it really, I don't picture ever retiring, like being that guy on a beach with a Hawaiian shirt on, just
Okay.
sipping martinis into the night. That's not going to be me. I have to maintain a baseline level of stress to be sane. I love being busy. I want to be flexible though. I want to have the flexibility to quit wherever I am, whenever I want. I don't plan to. I want to work. I want to spend my entire career at one firm if I can. That's what I hope for. But if I get treated really poorly, or the work environment gets so toxic that I don't have time for my family, I want to be able to move on. And I think none of us are taught how to do that. You're taught, try and go get as much education as you can, get as high paying of a job as you can, and then figure it out. And what a lot of people do is they get that high paying job and they don't know how to use the money. And then all of a sudden they're 40 and they start thinking about retirement, and that's too late. I mean, it's not too late, but it's much harder, because the longer you have to save, the more compound interest benefits you. If you invest like in a basic index fund, like the S&P 500 index with Fidelity, basically you just are buying a share of every company in that. So that fund has averaged about a 10% return over the past century. So pretty dependable. If you're earning 10% a year, your money doubles every 7 years. So $20,000 saved at 20 years old, it's 40 by 27. By 33, it's 80. By 40, it's 160. By 47, it's 320. By 53, it's 640. And then by 60, it's about 1.3 million, starting with only 20 grand. And you didn't even touch it. You just let it grow.
Wow.
And it's exponential the longer you go. So that's why I'm saying, if you've not researched compound interest, you do not have to be a stock guru to invest. The way most people become millionaires is not by inheritance, and it's not by making $1 million a year. It's by maybe earning an average of 70,000 over your lifetime and literally just dumping money a little bit every month into an index fund. It's called dollar cost averaging. You just buy a little bit, kind of like how you just put money each month into a savings account. Instead of a savings account, you're just buying shares of an index fund, and it just grows over time. Versus, if that 20 grand goes in a savings account, by the time you're 60, it's still 20,000. So you can choose, is it going to be 20,000 by the time you're 60, or is it going to be 1.3 million? And so that's the opportunity we have being young. If we're aggressive with our savings now, there is a benefit to not spending our money now. If there was no benefit to savings, then why bother even waiting? We don't know if you're going to have tomorrow. Just spend money and enjoy it. But when you know that by waiting a little bit and storing some of your money away, it could be literally worth so many times more than it is now, there's an incentive for us to be patient with some of the money. Obviously, I'm not saying live off of beans and rice unless you want to or can, but I certainly don't. I balance enjoyment with saving, and that's how I've always wanted to do it. But yeah, that's my long-winded proselytizing of finance.
That's awesome. You're so passionate about it. That's so cool.
I want people in our generation to succeed, man. And we feel like it's impossible. It's not. You got to be clever, but you can be empowered to be wealthy and to be successful and to be generous to others. And that's what I want for our generation. And a lot of us feel defeated and like it's impossible. Like that's something of the past, and it really isn't. It's from somebody who came from, like, I had $0 when I left home, got married, and is now on my way to creating a life that I've always wanted. It's doable. And again, I'm not like a genius IQ person. I just look into stuff and try and figure it out.
Wow. I feel so blessed to have access to this type of conversation. This is really amazing. You said something that I kind of wanted to point out earlier. It's really so small. Well, you said that people on Reddit are toxic lawyers. That was like a light bulb for me, because I was like, why is everyone so miserable on this channel or whatever you call it? And I think that's what it is, because I go there and I know I shouldn't go on Reddit. I know I need to stop, but it's kind of addicting. And I agree with what you said also about how you're never going to be someone who will retire because you need like a little bit of stress to like get you going. And I agree. And I think that's why I go on to Reddit, because I need a little bit of like dysfunction in my day to like feel alive. So that was like a huge like a aha moment for me. Um yeah,
Well, I'm
that's really
glad.
cool.
Yeah, I would say if you want a template for how not to interact with a partner or a potential, hiring employee at a law firm, look to about 90% of the posts on Reddit
Word. Yeah.
saying stuff like, if I don't get this job, my life is over and I'm worthless. Like, that's not, you should not go into this with that mindset. I've been that person. Trust, I've been the person who's like, I'm not achieving what I want, so I'm worthless. That's
Right.
wrong. You are worth so much more than your job or your profession or your grades. And if anyone who's listening to this is feeling that way or has dealt with the same sort of like self toxicity, purge that. Like, for me, I definitely feel I have the advantage of my faith to tell me that like my identity and my worth is in Christ. But ultimately, I am somebody who, I don't know, I get in my head a lot. I've dealt with a lot of anxiety, and like I've had a lot of self-loathing in the past, and I have very high expectations for myself. And I've had to learn to understand that my worth is not wrapped up in those things. And honestly, what's much more important is the impression I leave on the people around me, who I am in this world. Am I a kind person? Am I a positive presence in my friends and family's lives, those around me in church and the community? Or am I literally just living to pursue these achievements that make me look good and just be like a bit, like literally just a walking brag fest my whole life?
Mm.
That's not a life worth living. And what kind of self-worth is that, to only be worth just some kind of job? So that'd be my encouragement. If anyone's dealt with those feelings like I have, certainly don't, like, focus on being the kind of person you'd like to hang out with, and then work hard and let the results play out as they may. That's all you can do. All you can do is put in the effort and then try to be a good person. And then the rest is up to, whatever you believe in.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And that's something I'm actively struggling with. The elitism of law school and like the getting caught up in the success and prestige of getting into a Harvard or a Yale, or I mean, in my sister's case, she got into Duke, but she wants to do public interest work. She's just a hardworking student and she's like applied and got in. I mean, she got into a lot of great schools, but she didn't do it for name brand. So, and I want to get to that point where I apply because I want like the best education I can get, not because I want the biggest name on my resume.
Mm-hmm. This is going to be a hot take, I think. I don't think that going to a school ranked 75th or ranked number 2 makes much of a material difference in the quality of your legal education. I think you have access to amazing faculty at either school. You have access to the same cases, many of the same resources. Really, the only difference is who's recruiting there. That's it.
Okay.
And so if you turn out at a school that's lower ranked than you want, you can still fashion an amazing career out of that, and you can still learn how to be an amazing lawyer. Maybe everyone doesn't recognize that right out of the gate because you're not being recruited by a top firm. That doesn't matter. Work your butt off and then find your way into those offices, or challenge them with your own firm later on, win a case against the big guys. Like, ultimately, we've seen from attorneys like Camilo Vasquez that you are not restricted as a future attorney by your pedigree. It's about you. You are the secret sauce. And that's true whether you go to a Yale or a Cardozo or even a Cooley. You are the secret sauce, and you are going to determine whether or not you succeed in law school and succeed as an attorney.
Yeah. So so the reason why you want to go to a T20 is for the recruiting purposes? Because that's something that I was having a bit of a disconnect with. earlier?
That is basically exclusively it.
Okay.
So yeah, like a T20, the chances of getting access to the summer internships and the firms I'm hoping for. And again, a
Okay.
big part of this is that I'm already married. I'll be married 4 years
True.
in August.
Wow.
And my wife and I'm going to be 30 by the time I graduate, and my wife will be about 32. So really, we're wanting to start having kids sooner rather than
It's true.
later. And so being married, having kids, having a home, and my wife and I discussed this before we got married. This isn't for everyone, but my wife wants to be able to take care of our kids at home. She wants to be able to maintain our home and be able to work in the community in ways that she's interested in and invested in. Meanwhile, we decided that I was the one who was more invested in having a career. And so we both agreed that I would be the one to pay the bills. So I need to basically care for an entire family on just what I can earn. So I really need to be earning in this environment to be comfortable and be able to save money still, probably at least 100. And I want to be able to earn more than that because I want to be able to be really generous to people. I want to be able to have access to the biggest, most substantive cases and materials in our world related to the fields I'm interested in. And I want to be able to achieve financial independence for my family really early on. Ideally, by 45, I want to be able to do whatever I want. If I want to start my own firm or go back to college and get an education or take a year off completely, I want to be able to do that. And that's the kind of freedom I hope to have for me and my family, and just kind of chart a new course. My parents have been very supportive in that. My family's been very supportive in that. And it's really what I hope for. And so, like you said, it's really about the recruiting opportunities. I don't think that if I went to Yale, that I'm going to be a so much better prepared lawyer than if I went to U of H. I don't think that. I think that there are people just as, and in fact, I think there are people more brilliant at U of H who will grow up to be better attorneys and will be better prepared upon graduation than there are people at Yale. I fully believe that. It really is just, like you said, the law environment is pedigree and prestige oriented. And that's kind of self-fulfilling. The longer and longer the recruiters keep going to Yale, Harvard, and Stanford instead of the U of H's and the other schools in the lower ranks, the longer it's going to solidify the stratification between different tiers. And it's just going to continue. It's going to artificially make these schools seem so much better and attract higher level law students that are going to be more likely to pass the bar and more likely to get the top jobs, and then continue to have those outcomes which keep them higher in the rankings. It's it makes sense when you realize that that's how it's set up, but it'd be really cool to see that maybe change someday. I just don't know how it would. But ultimately, we're the generation that can change it. If we get to the highest ranks, we can influence the American Bar Association, the Law School Admissions Council. Maybe we can have a say in this type of stuff.
Right on. That is awesome. So I have 3 more questions before we wrap up. This one has kind of been burning for a minute. How do you seem, okay, so let me say it like this. You seem very well researched on the law school admission process and on firms and everything. So I'm sure it's no surprise that you'd be working 60 plus hours in big law. How do you plan to manage that and prepare for that, especially since you're predisposed to anxiety and depression?
So over time, and again, I'll say I have another advantage here with my faith. I've learned to manage my anxiety and my expectation. And I think most of my anxiety and depression has been related to a negative perception of myself.
Okay.
It's been related to low self-esteem, frustration, self-doubt, and I've learned not to place so much damn stock in myself. I've learned to ultimately, all I can do is put in the effort, do the research, put in the work based off of what I know, and the results will be what they're going to be. And I entrust the result to the Lord based on my faith. but I believe the same principles apply to someone whether or not you have my faith. I think that all you can do is research your interests, work hard, put in the effort you know you can put in within reason, and then the result's going to be what it's going to be. You can't control, none of us can control the result at all. And so stressing about that isn't going to help you. And in fact, it'll harm what you can control, which is your effort. In terms of managing hours like that, when I was working full time and studying the Lsat, I was honestly still spent a lot of my time not feeling busy enough. Like there was a time where I was, trading and investing and researching stocks, managing our house, managing my marriage, working full time, taking the Lsat, as well as lifting 5 times a week, about an hour and a half a day, and playing disc golf tournaments all at the same time. And sometimes I still didn't feel busy enough.
Wow.
And so for me, I don't think that type of environment, working 60 plus hours a week, is for everybody. But for me, the thought of being able to be busy constantly with a profession that is linked to my interests, my passions, and literally just honing skills that are literally paying me every day and getting paid to do it. Like I work hard in college. Like to get A's, I have to work hard. And I work hard and I'm paying to go to college right now. I'm paying to commute 40 minutes to school. I'm paying to park in a parking lot 20 minutes from my classes and walk a mile to my classes, and then pay for that class and pay for the materials. And a lot of it isn't even stuff I'm interested in, and I still find a way to enjoy it. If I can do that, I mean, the thought of actually being able to like work on my own interests every day and gain skills every day and get paid more amount of money than I can dream of to do it, it's like, it's an easy sell. And as busy as I stay, I still find time for my extended family and my wife constantly, whether it's in the morning, in the middle of the day, in the evening, we find time for each other. And so I'm not as concerned about that either. Am I going to have 4 or 5 hours extended every single day? No.
Okay.
I'm almost certainly not, but that's okay. And that's not something I depend on or require. The other cool thing is that a lot of firms are moving to a hybrid environment where you can work from home or in the office a few days a week. And so, looking to have kids and have a wife, like if I can work from home a couple of days a week, I could step aside from the desk for 10, 15 minutes and wrestle with my kid on the floor and get back to work. And that's how I work best a lot of the time anyway. I work in just a couple hour long chunks, take a little break, couple hour long chunks. I'm also the type of person who oftentimes gets inspiration to work late at night. So I'm the type of person who, if I have a task and it's, starting at 10 p.m., I can do it. I can work from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. and it's not a big deal.
Wow.
I do that. I don't even have to a lot of the time, and I still do it. So again, while the big law environment in particular isn't for everybody, I'd say for me, it's something that I think I would be pretty uniquely suited to. Anxiety is less based in my workload, and it's more based in my perception of myself. And so long as I'm not obsessing about myself, and I'm more focused on being a pleasant person to the people around me and my faith, that anxiety is kept at bay more.
Okay, that's an amazing answer. I really liked what you said about not putting so much stock in yourself, because I'm a Christian, and I think that's what I've been struggling with as of late, is like thinking that I'm in control when I'm not in control. I just need to like give my control to God and let him take care of it, and just like go along the path that he's like shining a light on me to go down. So yes, that was a great message. And then my next question is there any general advice that comes to mind that you want to give to someone who's in a similar situation that you were in the past? I don't know if that's well worded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I would say for me, I didn't know enough to make any decision when I first started researching this path. I didn't. And that is true of either saying, you know what, I'm not cut out for law, or that I am cut out for law. I didn't know enough back then. So I would say if you're in the same position as I was and you're interested in this profession, but maybe you've heard like some people, on the one hand, you think, man, it'd be amazing to be like Legally Blonde and just winning cases all the time when like 3% of cases ever make it to trial in civil cases. Or you're the type of person who's like, all I've ever heard is that it's miserable and I'll hate it, so I'm not going to do it. Do some more digging.
Okay.
Really look at the assignments that people say that they're doing. I've literally researched forums. I've read anecdotes from people who literally work in the profession, and they describe a day in their life from when they wake up to when they close shop, and what type of work they're doing. And again, trial is rarely part of it. So for a litigator or a transactional attorney, you'll be researching, what type of documents will you be reviewing, or what type of research will you be trying to perform on cases to structure like a case strategy for winning a litigation. So getting access to that kind of information, get access to information on the law school admissions process and understand it inside and out. Have a game plan for, what type of schools you're looking into, how you're going to manage money once you graduate, what type of job you want to do. Try and figure out as much as you can ahead of time. Because from what I've read, no matter how much you are excited about being a lawyer, know that you want to do it. Law school is hard, and it's, for many lawyers, it's the hardest part of being a lawyer is just doing law school. And what I would hate is for somebody who ultimately is cut out for the profession and would have succeeded if they knew what they were in for and knew what they wanted to do, flushes out of law school because it's too hard and they're not as committed as they thought they were. So I think law school is the type of place where if you don't know why you're there, you're probably going to get flushed out by the imposter syndrome. And so I would encourage knowing why you're there. And in the process of learning and researching and knowing, you might decide it's not for you. I've done that about plenty of professions I thought I wanted to do when I was younger. And I've heard the same thing from people who are masters in their field today. Or you might decide, like I did, I was on and off with law at different times based on the research I was doing. I've come to the conclusion after working in different professional environments and researching the profession, the type of work that is done, that I desperately want to do this work. I don't care that a lot of it's boring. I don't care about the long hours. I want to be a lawyer, and I know what type of work I'm going to be doing, and I'm excited as heck for it. And so for me, I am challenged every day right now. I'm challenged with the thought of like, I left my clients that I used to help. I used to help people every day manage their finances better. I used to educate people every day, and I was paid to do it. And I left that to be back here. That challenges my perception of my self-worth all the time, because now I'm like losing money just to be educated when before I was making money to educate others.
Right.
So my sense of productivity and self-worth is challenged constantly. This is hard. And to stay on this path, and to also not just stay on this path, but to excel in every step of the way, requires, it requires support, and it requires a commitment to this process and an understanding. I know why I'm doing this. There's no doubt in my mind that I know why I'm doing this. And I've prayed through it as well. And I feel that the Lord has been opening doors for me to do it. And I feel empowered in that sense as well. So I can look all of the trash that's in my face. I can look at every mountain I have to climb, and I can say, all right, let's do this. I've prepared. and I'm not going to roll down that hill. So that's for someone in my situation who's looking at this mountain that you have to climb, that's looking at this whole law process of getting into the field, and it seems imposing. Just make sure you know your why. And if you know your why and you feel well prepared, that's the best advice I can give, because knowledge is empowerment. In almost any sense, in every occasion, knowledge is empowerment. And if you know why you're doing something, you're educated about the process, you're going to be a powerful force to reckon with in any situation. And plus, it's fun to be able to talk with people who are exposed to all the toxicity as you and I are, and relate to the insanity of this process.
So insane. Oh my God. I feel like I'm in the Hunger Games sometime. It's just so ridiculous. The hoops are jumping through, but that was really great. I really enjoyed the know your why part. And it's really nice to see someone who's so like, it just seems so simple for you to be committed to this process. It's not overly complicated. You have a purpose and you're executing your plan, and that's really admirable to see.
Thank you. That's a really huge compliment, and I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
And I respect massively your work effort, and ultimately like your upward trend on everything you've been working towards, and managing a podcast as well. Whoop. All this stuff, that's a lot to deal with. And I don't know if I've never tried to manage a podcast before. I've thought of it's crazy.
It's definitely one of those things where if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. So like this is like my hobby. This is me having fun right now. So it's not work to me, which is a blessing, and I'm grateful for that. But okay, I know you have to go soon, so just one last question. Any regrets? And if so, why? And if not, also why?
So I would say the only regret I would have is all the times I allowed myself to feel the toxicity that I felt, or to miss out on the peace that I can have in Christ by focusing on just my efforts and my self-worth in Him. And because I lost a lot of peace, and I wasn't the type of person that I could have been. I wasn't the pleasant presence in people's lives that I could have been in those moments where I was so obsessed with myself and my own goals, and with trying to manipulate a result, that I even ultimately was less effective at the goals I was wanting to pursue. And that's the greatest regret I could say that I'd have. And I'm pretty thankful to say that I haven't spent a lot of time in that place. The Lord has been very good. And overall, there's no event or decision I can look back on, or a result. Like, I've had denials from scholarships I've applied for. I've been denied from institutions I've applied for. I've had a lot of rejections in this process. And I'm thankful because I can look back because of my faith and say, this was just the Lord saying no to one thing and opening the door to another.
Amen.
And ultimately, I think whether or not you have our faith, I think it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And I think it's a powerful and true thing. I think if you keep the mentality of all I can control is my effort and what kind of person I am, and then leave the rest to chance, because that's all that you can do. You can't control anything beyond that. That will bring a level of peace that'll make this process a heck of a lot more fun. Try to be grateful for every day.
Right.
Try to find something to be thankful for. Because if you can be thankful right now when we're broke, and when we're applying to law school, and we're reading Reddit forums, imagine how much more easy it'll be to be thankful in the future when you're a successful attorney.
Yes, I love that. But I try every day to say thank you to God for giving me another day on this planet. So you just reminded me to do that. So that's really cool. And that's really, really great advice. Um, I love this conversation. Thank you so much, Jacob, for doing this. I loved your story. I'm so appreciative.
Absolutely, Adesua. I really appreciate the chance to be interviewed. I honestly wasn't sure if I would be a fit or if it would work out, but I'm so glad I got to participate. It's so cool to hear that you're a Christian going through this insane process as well, exposed to all the wonderful toxicity and trials. Just to have a kindred spirit in that is really awesome. Um, I'm going to wish you all the best and pray for wild success in this process for you and for both of us.
Thank you. I will also pray for you. Well, that's another episode, guys. Bye.
Bye bye.